Meow. Got my cat ears on today. I missed Halloween. I was a cat girl though. Yeah, I'm a trans meme sometimes. We're talking today about dysphoria and my experience of it, because one of y'all, Sarah, I think it was, asked about what has my experience been with dysphoria, and maybe it's a reflection point for you to think about your experience, because we explore these topics of personal growth and trans in Tea Time, which is unedited, unscripted. So welcome to the show. If you're new here, write a comment down below and say hello. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're not new here, I would love even more to hear what your thoughts are from this episode, as usual. So dysphoria and my experience. I usually try not to speak about my own experience and really talk about the topic, but since this is a question directed at me, I guess there is some interest in hearing my own personal story of dysphoria as a point of comparison and maybe exploration. So I'll try to explore that as much as I can, and we'll start with kind of like 13. So at 13, I remember looking at myself in the mirror as I was going through puberty, looking into my eyes and seeing beautiful eyes, but also feeling like why isn't anyone seeing that there is a beautiful girl here? And not feeling like I really wanted to be a boy, but then saying, well, I was born a boy, that's the end of the story, and moving on. And this cycle of self-repression kind of became so frequent that it just became numb, and then it disappeared because I just stopped believing in it, stopped listening to it, and I just moved on with my life. And that was the early sign. Had I have listened, and I really wish I would have, then I would have transitioned a lot earlier. But it took another 10 years for me more than 10 years actually, to actually acknowledge that I was trans. So about 4.5 years ago, I acknowledged that I was a trans person. I was non-binary, and this is where dysphoria kind of came in. I would say before that, the 13 till like 4 years ago, there was not a lot of dysphoria. I just always felt like the skinny guy and never felt like I was buff or strong or that I really delivered on masculine ideals. And I felt like I always needed to compensate for that in some way, whether that was with my super low voice or just the way that I was kind of tough or a little bit more closed-hearted. None of you know me pre-transition, but I'll have to say that I was a little closed-hearted and a lot less vulnerable with myself, with you, and with anyone else, because I felt like I was hiding something that was ugly. And I think that's the other dysphoria that was there that I didn't even understand. It was so low level. It was beyond my conscious. It was somewhere deep within my subconscious. Hiding her meant not acknowledging that she existed, and instead was hiding the thing that I was hiding a thing that I was hiding. So I didn't know what I was hiding. I was just hiding something. And that something felt ugly because I was scared of it. And so I always felt like when I would look in your eyes, when I'd look in a friend's eyes, that there would be a part of me that was not accessible and wanted to be accessed, but just couldn't find a pathway to them because I was afraid of being seen as ugly and expressing this ugliness that just didn't want to come out. It wasn't until much later, about 4 years ago, that I started to recognize that maybe this ugliness inside me was actually just this woman inside me that wanted to emerge. And so thus began my dysphoria with my body. Like I'd say officially, body dysphoria started about 4.5 years ago. And it was incremental. I know there's many stories of trans women who have said, or trans people who have known since they were 3 and or 4, and they've just had dysphoria for their entire lives. And it's really hard. And I don't have that. And in some ways, I think this is a blessing, because when you have gender dysphoria, very obviously, and you're dealing with it on a constant basis, and everyone's saying, no, you can't be that gender, and you're not even old enough to be able to have control over yourself medically, it creates a psychotic state where you're just feeling depressed and repressed and feeling like no one's listening to you or acknowledging. And so it becomes this whole thing. It becomes this bundled up emotions of hard things to deal with. Me over here was so repressed that I just kind of dodged this bullet of all of this repression and depression in a way where people treated me like a guy. I felt validated as a guy, and I was fine with that because I didn't acknowledge It was so deep, I didn't know. But once I started to know, this is where things change. Acknowledging that I was trans, and then moving towards gradually acknowledging that I was a trans woman, excuse me, has had this knock-on effect where I keep moving the line of what I deem acceptable as a woman. I just need a little bit of tea. It's tea time for my throat. So I started with being like, oh, well, it's okay that I don't have boobs and that, you know, I have a dick and that I'm read as male and that it's okay, it's fine. Like that's my body, that's how it works. I accept that. But then as I started to take hormones and my boobs started to grow a little bit and I started to acknowledge that I was a woman, suddenly it was like, you know what? I'd actually really like some boobs. I'd really like these to grow. And you know what? Like this body fat on my body, it's kind of like I'm liking these changes, but I'm noticing how much I'm lacking in these changes. And that development has progressed and progressed and progressed to the point where I am now 2.5 years into my hormonal transition. And I don't have the breasts that I want anymore. So whereas before I was like, I'm fine with a flat chest. And I even said to my ex at the time, I was like, I want to take hormones, but don't worry, I don't want boobs. And now I'm like, I want boobs. I want boobs now. Like, when am I going to get boobs? And yeah, I have like a little bit, but I'm talking to surgeons about having breast surgery, and I've scheduled my facial feminization surgery. Before, I did not have an issue with my face, and I knew that FFS was an option, but I was questioning it, and I didn't really think it was for me. But over time, my dysphoria or my expectations of what I want have changed dramatically to the point where now, before I was like non-passing, that's fine, it's cool, it's whatever. It's like, I want to pass, I want to have FFS, I want to have breast surgery, I want to be able to work on my hips somehow, and I exercise all the time to work on my butt because that's the only muscle that I can grow that's like a feminine aspect of my body that I have control over. But I'm not decided on this, and I feel a little bit, it's questionable because I don't want to raise this thought as a thing that any of us should aspire to or be doing, but I am thinking about it, and I just want to mention that because this is how far I'm thinking of pushing things. I'm thinking about having a rib removed so that I can get a more feminine figure because my hips are past the point of like being able to grow, and so I'm basically stuck with my masculine hips. And I want more curvature in my frame. And I feel like the dysphoria around my rib cage has gotten bigger because it feels very square. Yeah, and that's honestly the biggest thing in my dysphoria that has happened and changed is around my hips and my rib cage. Like that's the biggest thing. People say, oh yeah, you're so pretty, you don't need to do FFS. And I say, I can kind of agree, but you don't see my face every day and you don't know what I look at and what I see. And that's a separate topic, but that's the dysphoria that I'm dealing with now, is like changing the things to help myself move into a place where I feel happy. And this is also a cautious area that I would say you have to be mindful of. Like, how are you treating your body and how are you seeing the things that you change? Because when you transition, you open the door to saying, I can change my body. I can change it in ways that I want to. And once you open that door, if you're not careful, you can get sucked into this perfectionism, this sense of, well, you know, I can make this more perfect and I can make that more perfect, and I am a perfectionist. So when I say, oh, like I could, now that I've opened the door to change my body, why don't I just make this list of all these things that I can do to change it? And something that's not on my list, but I can totally see myself putting on the list is a gender reassignment surgery. I don't have a problem with my genitals now. I don't. I have never had dysphoria with my genitals. I think it's sexy. I think it's cute. I think it's what makes me unique. But I can see a path where once I've had my breast surgery, once I've had my face surgery, if I've had other surgeries, and I'm basically like a full-on cis-passing woman to myself, that's the most important part, to myself, I'm going to look around me and say, well, what's the last thing that's kind of holding me in being trans? And I put that into quotes because being trans is something that I'll always have, but being trans in a way where I'm aware of my transness, it's that, because I can't wear a bikini without dealing with it. I can't like have sex without someone knowing about it. And I think at that stage I might say, you know what, I don't want to have this anymore, and I would like to kind of change that. And that really scares me. It does. Because I don't want to change it now. But I also know the momentum of myself, and I know how like what my history has been. I know what my history has been with my dysphoria. So like, I am looking towards my future knowing my own patterns and trying to assess how to manage and work with that. And my best effort that I can make is saying, you know, I accept it, and I think this part of me is beautiful, and I don't need to change that. And I'm hoping I can also do that with my ribs, like not to change them. But there's also a part that's hoping I can do it, and that's the curiosity. That's the thing of where you've opened the door, you know, would my life be better if I did this? I don't know. I don't think I can answer that until I've had my face surgery and my breast surgery. Those are things for sure that I want. After having these surgeries, I'll be experienced enough to understand what it's really like to go through a major surgery, and if those things can really help compensate enough for me to not do ribs and for me to not, you know, do that thing. So that's my journey through dysphoria, and also my forecasting of dysphoria, actually. Thanks for joining me today, and yeah, thanks. I'll see you tomorrow. Let me know what your thoughts are about dysphoria. Bye.